I didn't use a tutor, I didn't revise all day, and I definitely wasn't the top of my class at first. However, I still achieved 98% in GCSE maths. In this video, I'm going to be sharing the exact strategy I used to get there, and it's a smart, focused approach that anyone can use. If you're aiming for a grade 7, 8, or 9, then this video is for you. For those of you who are new to the channel, hey, I'm Varjod, I'm the founder of Mobile Tutors, and every year we help thousands of students increase their GCSE and A-level grades. I myself got 98% in most of my GCSEs and A-levels, and I have a first-class degree in Maths and Statistics from the London School of Economics. So let's get into it. Let's break it down. We'll cover the 4 steps I used to get there, which is firstly the topic list, question practice, past papers, and then lastly exam technique. So first up, we have understanding the topic list. Now, this is a step that a lot of students miss, but is the foundation of everything. What I want you to do is to get your exam board's topic list for maths. So my tip here is to break the syllabus down into chunks. You ideally want to focus on one part of the syllabus at a time, rather than jumping around and doing random topics. Remember, it's best to do things in increasing difficulty. So start with the easier topics and then work your way into the harder stuff. The main reason being is because a lot of the harder topics will depend on the easier topics. So for example, I would learn factorizing harder quadratics before going on to something like simplifying algebraic fractions. The reason being is because I can't do simplifying algebraic fractions before I fully understand how to factorize harder quadratics. And here's another mistake that a lot of students do, is that they overlook the easy topics. Now, some of the stuff is incredibly easy, but that doesn't mean you should just tick it off and you think you know what you're doing. A big mistake that a lot of students make is that they'll highlight and tick off a lot of the easy topics because they think they know how to do them. Don't be overconfident, because you need to remember a lot of these easy topics do have some very hard questions associated with them, and you don't want to miss these out. For example, many students overlook topics like error intervals because they think it's easy. However, often students get this wrong, so you don't want to become overconfident and miss these marks out. And this is the case when it comes to the exam paper. A lot of higher level students will get questions like frequency polygons wrong, which is a foundation topic. This is because students are overconfident and they just overlook these topics without revising them. These are easy 2 marks which you could get, so you don't want to miss these out. So the next step is targeted exam practice. Once I knew exactly what I needed to revise, I started doing exam questions by topic to make sure I could go over all of these areas. Now, I use sites like Maths Genie, Corbett Maths, or even Physics and Maths Tutor, so I could drill these topics in and do all of the questions on that topic until I felt confident with it. Now, here's what really made the difference for me. I didn't skip any questions on these sheets, and I make sure I completed them fully. I also didn't skip any of the topics that I was unsure about on the previous step. As mentioned before, you're losing marks because you're overconfident that you know more than you actually do. When you do these worksheets fully, you'll realize that you're actually making more mistakes than you think. It's no good convincing yourself that, oh, I could have got those extra 2 marks because that was only a sign error, or I just misread the question. That's not a good enough excuse. Now, it's important to remember, until you don't nail these difficult topics, you will hardly ever increase your marks in the exam. Now, let's say you do loads of papers. On all of these papers, you get a certain set of topics always right, and you always get a certain set of topics wrong. Until you don't focus on these difficult topics that you're always getting wrong, you'll never actually move the needle and increase your grade. Now, I often explain this example to a lot of my students with a negative reinforcement loop. So what I mean by this is that when you avoid a topic, or you don't focus on a difficult topic, you often feel better because you're putting it off. However, what tends to happen is that the more you put it off, the weaker you actually get at that topic, because it's longer since you've done it and you haven't actually done no practice on it. However, since you're not practicing it, your understanding remains weak. And when that topic comes up again, you hate it even more because now you still don't understand it and you're avoiding it again. And this cycle repeats. Now, here's another top tip. If you want the best chances of achieving a grade 8 or 9, then ideally you want to finish this targeted topic practice by the end of year 10. This will allow you enough time to do past paper practice. Now, this would likely mean that you have to cover a lot of the content before it's covered in school. But trust me, if you spend the time and you do this yourself, it's actually a big game changer. Now, make sure you complete all of the topic practice before you move on to the next step, which is exam papers. If you're finding this video helpful, please like and comment below. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Also, if there's anything that you want me to cover in particular, please drop a comment below and I'll make sure I go over this. Now, step 3, past papers are gold. Now, this is a step that a lot of students wait too long for and you need to do sooner. However, as I mentioned before, you want to start past paper practice at least 6 to 9 months before your GCSEs. Now, past papers changed everything for me, and the reason why I did so well is because I started a lot earlier than most students. Now, before starting past papers, what I want you to do is to create a checklist of every single exam paper available to you under your exam board. So for example, you would list out all of the papers like 2018 paper 1 and 2, and even the November papers as well. Now, once you've created this list, have a separate column for the mark you're achieving in each paper. This will make sure we can track your progress, but also make sure that we don't miss any paper out. Now, the best way to analyze how you went wrong is to firstly look up the solutions. Now, I don't necessarily mean the mark scheme because this can often be quite difficult to read. But what you can do is you can often find the solutions normally on YouTube to that paper, and that will tell you exactly how to answer that question. Once you've written down the correct solution to this question, I want you to write down this question in a mistake log. So what that will tell you is that all the mistakes you've made across all of the papers. So for example, if I got question 2 wrong on November 2018, on my mistake log, I will note that question down so that later on I can come back to that and read it for revision. Now, the reason why doing exam papers is the best technique is because not only do you get to iron out all of your mistakes, but it's important to remember that a lot of the exam paper questions are similar. Now, if you do every single exam paper out there, the chances are that you would have seen most of the questions that can come up. Now, of course, every year there are a few questions that are different, but the chances are that if you've done all of the papers, you would have covered majority of the questions that can come up. And over time, what you'll see is once you do these papers, your marks will shoot up. The reason is not because you're smarter than everyone else, but because you're ironing out all of your mistakes and you're actually doing the practice. Now, once you revisit this mistake log, you'll be able to see all of the mistakes you've made over all of the papers. And when you go back to the first question, you'll realize a lot of this stuff now you're actually better at because you would have done so much practice in between. Now, a lot of students think I should only do the exam papers from my exam board, but because we've started so early, we would have finished these already. And doing questions from different exam boards will just give you more experience in GCSE maths. Of course, prioritize doing your own exam board first, but if you're in a position where you've done everything and you have so much time left, then it won't harm you. In fact, it would actually be a big benefit to you if you do other exam boards. Remember, GCSE maths on the whole is the same whichever exam board you do. Now, here's a pro tip. If you're struggling with the first paper, because often a lot of students will find doing the first paper extremely difficult, what I would suggest is doing the paper along with the solutions. Now, what I mean by this is have the paper open along with the solutions so you can do the first question and read the solutions at the same time. What this will do is it will make you feel a little bit more comfortable and confident that you can actually do the questions. And then once you've done the first paper, you'll actually realize it's not that bad. And when you come onto the second or third paper, you can actually do it yourself. Now, the last step is mastering exam technique. Now, this is the step that really separates the grade 7 and the grade 9 students. Now, you can be extremely intelligent and know all of the maths in the world. However, if you mess up your exam technique, you'll still end up losing a lot of marks. You have to be strategic on how you play the exam. Now, remember, getting a grade 8 or 9 isn't necessarily down to how smart you are, but it's about how good you are about avoiding mistakes. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You only actually need 25 marks on average on a GCSE maths paper to get a grade 5, around 35 marks to get a grade 6, or around 45 marks to get a grade 7. Now, what this usually means is that you only need to get around 10 questions correct on a higher exam paper to get a grade 5, around 13 questions to get a grade 6, and around 16 questions roughly to get a grade 7. Now remember, there's roughly 25 questions on a GCSE exam paper and you only need to get around 16 of them fully right to get a grade 7. If it's this easy, then why are most students struggling to even get a grade 5 or 6? Well, let me explain. So firstly, you need to prioritize doing the easy questions. As mentioned before, you only need to get 10 questions correct on average to get a grade 5. So students don't get these grades because they try being a hero and doing every single question in the exam and then end up messing them all up. You need to focus on doing the first 10 to 13 questions correctly, and that will secure you a grade 5 or 6. I can pretty much guarantee that if you're stuck at a grade 4 or 5, the chances are you're actually getting a lot of the easy questions wrong. If you just prioritize doing the first 10 to 13 questions on a paper, you'll actually get a better result than what you're getting now. So you need to stop trying to be a hero and complete the whole paper and then mess up the first chunk rather than just focusing on the first chunk and getting it fully correct. Now, the next thing you need to do is you need to keep track of time. Now, in the exam, I never ran out of time and I actually had a lot of time left. But what I usually used to do is that if I read a question and I don't understand it, I'll read it one more time. And if I still don't understand it, I'll move on. The chances are if you read something and within 30 seconds you don't know what to do, you shouldn't actually waste more time trying to figure it out. Because what's happening is you're actually losing out on other marks you can get later on in the paper. What you should do is move on, do all of the questions that you can do, and then come back and do these questions. Remember, if in 30 seconds you can't understand it, if you spend another 5 or 6 minutes trying to understand it, you're just going to waste too much time. Now, my next tip is to recheck your calculations as you do them. What you don't want to do is leave all of your checking till the end of the paper, and then what you realize is that on question 2, you made a very silly error early on in the question. Now you don't have a lot of time left. What will happen is that you're going to panic and you'll have to do the whole question again. But you can avoid this very easily by just doing each question carefully and checking the calculations as you do them. What will happen is you'll actually save yourself a lot of time later on when it comes to checking. Now, the next tip, which often goes without saying, is that you should always write all of your working. Now, even if you don't know how to do a question and it's extremely difficult, you should always write something down. Remember, if you wrote nothing down, you're definitely going to get 0 marks on that question. But if you wrote something, there are chances you could pick up 1 or 2 marks. Now, my next tip, which kind of relates to my previous one, is about proof checking. Now, when you proof check your work, you don't want to just read over all of your working, because what often happens is you're going to convince yourself what you've written is actually correct. Now, what I would suggest is that on a lot of the harder questions that you're unsure about, you should actually, on the side of the paper, redo the question. The reason I say this is because you don't want to just skim over your working and just read it line by line and say, okay, that adds up to that, that gives me that, etc. Because what that means is you're just going to convince yourself what you've written on your paper is right without actually looking at the question again and giving it a whole new approach. Remember, we're going to have so much time anyway because you followed all the other tips in this video, and we're going to have loads of time to finish off the rest of the questions. So we will have time to go and check it and do it properly. Now, my last tip is a very special tip because a lot of students don't know this, and this is about follow-through marks. Now, what are follow-through marks? Well, follow-through marks mean that you can get marks from part B in a question even if you got part A wrong. So how does this work? So for example, let's say you have a question like a line of best fit question where part A asks you to draw a line of best fit and part B asks you to use the line basically to get some data off it. Now, if you don't know how to do part A because you don't know how to draw the line or you're unsure, what you can go ahead and do is draw a line that you think could be the answer. Let's just say it's wrong, for example. Now, when it comes to part B, we can actually use this line and take the data from the line, which is actually wrong because we know we've done the wrong thing anyway in part A, but you'll still get the marks because you've used the correct methodology to get the marks in part B. And this is how follow-through marks work. What this means is you can pick up marks in part B without even getting part A right. So my tip here is to write something down for part A and then go on to part B if you know how to do part B. So I know this video has been long and there's a lot of information, but let me quickly summarize everything we've covered. So step 1 is to have your exam board topic list. The next thing you want to do is you want to go and do targeted topic practice on your weak areas. Then what you want to do is you want to start past papers early and make sure you complete all of the papers. And lastly, what you want to do is nail your exam technique. All of this sounds simple, and it actually is, but the problem is that most students are lazy and they want to cut corners. Remember, there's no easy way out of this. You have to do all of the steps I mentioned consistently, but that's the hardest part. Remember, consistency is key, but it's hard to stay consistent. It's like going to the gym for one session and expecting your dream body. We all know that it takes consistent training and diet to get these results. So why would it be different for GCSE maths? Thanks for watching and enjoy your revision.